Of the Fort Wayne Community Schools Board of Trustees. We begin each meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please rise. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And roll call of members.
Good evening, Steve Corona from the 5th District.
Hello, Tom Smith from the 3rd District.
Maria Norman, member at large.
Ann Duff, member at large.
Jordan Lebemoff, the 4th District.
And I'm Julie Hollingsworth, elected from District 1. And my far left is Janet Doherty, the clerk of the board. Good evening. And our superintendent, Dr. Wendy Robinson.
Good evening.
Good evening. So we have no awards and recognitions, so we go right to the consent agenda, and those are items that come to us every meeting. They include the minutes from the previous meeting on June 10th, vouchers and payroll, and the personnel report. So, do we have a motion and a second?
I move for approval.
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Maria. Okay, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Dr. Robinson, was there anything on the personnel report you wanted to highlight?
No, I think, I don't know if I wanted to start an uprising at the board meeting. But we have Mr. Ed King, who's announced that he's retiring, so you didn't hear from me. He's been a fixture forever, forever, and forever.
Maria and I were just discussing whether we should get the vote, just to vote no on the personnel report for that reason. But I'm not sure that would have a big effect. So evidently, so if you can make it to the Three Rivers Festival this summer, the parade when the Northside Band is marching, that will be his last hurrah. Correct? Official hurrah.
His last hurrah, but he, along with several other high school band directors, have been absolutely instrumental, and Ed takes responsibility. We should give him responsibility for our Be Instrumental program and for the growth of the instrumental music. And I'm not going out in public once the parents hear, so don't tell them I said because that's one of the stipulations. I was never to let him retire, but I can't do that.
Nope, can't. Okay, so we have no old business. That brings us to new business, and first is the 1920 grant application for the non-English speaking program. It's recommended that the board approve the application for and acceptance of the non-English speaking program grant for 1920 in the amount of $1,087,089 from the Office of English Learning and Migrant Programs of the Indiana DOE. This non-English speaking grant is state funding allocated annually based on the number of limited English proficient students in the Fort Wayne Community Schools during the previous year. Funds from this grant will allow for the continuation of a range of services for the district's English language learners program. The funds in this year's grant are specifically designated for personnel, professional learning, instructional materials, and translation. This non-competitive grant was written by Emily Schwartz-Kearns, ELL manager, supports advancement intended and outlined in Fort Wayne Community School District Goal 1, achieve and maintain academic excellence, and Goal 2, engage parents and the community. And questions will be answered by Emily Schwartz-Kearns. Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Steve. So, questions? Emily, is this we're doing 2 grants, right? Mm-hmm. So, is this an increase or?
Well, the first grant before you is the non-English speaking program, and that one has increased. The other is Title III, and that one has decreased.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So now, because I just read that, the state did increase funding for ELL programs.
Right, and that's the state funding, the non-English speaking program. So that's really good news. We're
Right.
up over $200,000. And that non-English speaking program can be used for basic services like our ELL teachers and interpreters. So that will allow us to take a little bit of the burden off of general fund.
Great.
That the general fund pays the majority of the cost of the ELL program.
Right, right. Okay. Any
One
other
of the conversations we'll be talking about later with the board, we're going to be working with the state, looking at all the title funds, because right now, each of them have very specific guidelines, and they're trying to help us be more efficient with the use, because being honest, sometimes all 4 of them are aimed at the same kids, but they all have something different they want you to do. So we'll be talking and probably having a work session. We're working with the federal programs people at the state, and they've come up and they're very eager to kind of work with us on that. Won't get us any more money, but potentially some flexibilities in how we can use those monies to best advantage.
Right, right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so now we have the 1920 grant application, Title III, language instruction for limited English proficient and immigrant students. It's recommended that the board approve the application for an acceptance of Title III, language instruction for limited English proficient and immigrant students grant for 1920 in the amount of $397,070 from the Office of English Learning and Migrant Programs. This Title III grant is federal funding allocated annually by the Indiana DOE based on the number of limited English proficient students in Fort Wayne Community Schools during the previous school year. Funds from this grant will allow for the continuation of a range of supplemental services for the district's ELL program. The funds in this year's grant are specifically designated for supplemental instructional materials, professional learning, and family engagement. This non-competitive grant was written by Emily Schwartz-Kearns and supports our Goal 1 and Goal 2. Questions will be answered by Emily Schwartz-Kearns. Motion and a second.
Move for approval.
Second.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Ann. So this one went down a little bit.
Correct. This is the
How
Title
much?
III funding, which is federal funding. So the amount for the entire state stayed the same, but because the ELL population across the state is increasing, the per pupil amount decreased. So even though we have more ELL students each year, because that per pupil decreased, our total amount is down a bit in this one.
Interesting. Okay. Any other questions?
And this one, you mentioned that the federal one had a little bit more flexibility with how it can be used. Does this one have more restrictions?
Actually, the state funding is more flexible. That can be used for just about anything related to ELL, including the basic required instruction and interpreting translation. Title III has to be purely supplemental. So that is what Dr. Robinson was talking along with Title I, Title II. Those are supplemental grants. So it can't be used to pay ELL teachers or basic services.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we have the bid recommendation for food, beverages, and bread. It's recommended that an award be made to the lowest responsible and responsive bidders meeting specifications and quality standards. We have 4 bidders for food: Alpha Baking Company, Commercial Food Service, Gordon Food Service, and Stance Food Service, Inc., for a grand total of just under $4 million. We have beverages from Commercial Food Service, Gordon Food Service, Stance Food Service, for a grand total of $517,653.48, and then bread from the Alpha Baking Company and Gordon Food Service, and that is $74,820.59. The food portion of the bid is for 494 items to be used in the school lunch program at the Nutrition Process Center and the 17 cooking kitchens from August 1st, 2019 through July 31st, 2020. This bid includes items such as fruits and vegetables, meat, and staples such as flour, sugar, salt. The beverage portion is for bottled water and juice. The bread portion is for bread, buns, and muffins. Some items were withdrawn from the bid because of menu changes, the receipt of government commodities, or the absence of an acceptable bid. A comparison of prices by item is on file in purchasing services and may be reviewed upon request. Bids were mailed to 18 prospective bidders. 4 responded to the food portion and all are recommended. 4 responded to the beverage portion and 3 are recommended, and 3 responded to the bread portion and 2 are recommended. Questions will be addressed by Director of Nutrition Services, Candace Hager. So do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Steve. Any questions? Steve?
Candy, it has nothing to do with what we have before us, but I had a question about, somebody asked me about children who have peanut allergies, and I contacted Janet about this last week, and is it my understanding that we do not seek out or try to buy a peanut substitute, or have we just removed those items entirely from our menus?
We try to serve very little peanut butter or peanut products in the elementary school. We do have a substitute. It's called Sun Butter. It's made from soy products. We don't
Does it
Plain-
taste good?
Not as good as peanut butter, if you want my honest opinion,
Okay.
but it's somewhat acceptable.
Is it expensive?
A tad more, not major.
So
not
do we
major.
just avoid it entirely, the substitute, or try to offer something different?
Well, for the sake of variety, we include that in some of our breakfasts so that there's a variety of breakfast. We don't ever claim to be peanut-free schools because we do not require our parents to not bring peanut butter in packed lunches. So when we have a severe allergy in a school, we designate peanut-free tables
I see.
so the children can sit at a table designated for just that particular allergy. Peanut allergies are a continual worry,
Yeah.
and we take every precaution that we can possibly take to keep any anaphylactic issues from arising.
You'll be buying more food later this year?
We will be buying more
And-
food.
And do you sample some of the products from time to time?
I sample all of them. Can you tell?
Well, I'd like to volunteer Tom Smith and myself for the next time.
Okay.
You sample food. I did this
Food
a couple of
tasters.
years ago, but I think we'd enjoy it.
I think you would enjoy it.
Yeah, okay.
We're in the midst of doing cuttings of different products before the next bid goes out.
Okay.
This bid is for the 1920 school year. We are already working on the menu
Wow.
and the cuttings for the 2021 school year.
Now, when you say cuttings, you mean
Comparing
items that will
products
be-
to products. In our business, it's called can cutting or cuttings.
Okay.
If it's strictly vegetables or fruits that come from a can, it's a can cutting. We do a blind test so that we don't know what brand it is. We just pick what we feel is the best flavor and so on and so forth. And I did also want you to know that we are having a heavy push, and we are almost 100% at whole muscle meats now. We've really tried in the last 2 years to upgrade the quality of the foods that we're serving our students, and we're just about there. Consequently, you see a little bit of increase in the amount of food that we spend because whole muscles cost more than parts.
I remember that lesson.
Yes. As McDonald's used to say, pieces, parts.
Candace, I have a question for you. I noticed that 18 people were invited to bid. There were 9 winners. Of those 9, they were all from out of either state or out of Fort Wayne. Were many local companies offered? Did you select bids from local people?
Yes, as much as possible. Obviously, Gordon's is a Michigan-based, but it services the entire United States. Stan's is a local company from South Bend. and they are a family-owned business, and so they're not quite as large as the Gordons of the states, but they do a very good job
Is
in
it-
school food service.
Has this been a trend lately where they're all not from Fort Wayne? I'm just curious.
We don't really have any distributorships here in Fort Wayne for food. Super Value is more grocery. It doesn't deal in K-12.
Okay.
So we deal with those who are the most popular in the region. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Good.
And so, just so that I'm understanding this correctly, there are 4 companies listed under food, and so certain aspects of that food list are going to be fulfilled by these 4 different companies?
Correct.
Okay.
Lowest and responsible bidder got each of the line items.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, you'll be sure to notify.
I
these two
will.
when the
I
food
will. We'll
tasting
invite him at the
opportunity
next cutting.
arises.
It's usually in the middle of the day.
That's fine.
Okay.
Fine for me.
Never
All
miss a
right.
meal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Candace. Okay, all those in favor of approving these bids signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have the school technology advancement, account application. It's recommended that the board approve the application for and the receipt of advancement from the school technology advancement account in the amount of $588,080 for the 1920 school year. The school technology advancement account provides funds annually for school systems to purchase computer technology for student instruction. Fort Wayne Community Schools uses these monies to fund learning and technology plans of schools. The request of $588,080 based on a guideline provided by the state for $500 for each 25 students. Funds are provided in the form of a loan with a very low interest rate. The last loan under this program had an interest rate of 1%. Funds would be budgeted in the debt service fund to repay this loan beginning in 2021. Questions will be addressed by Technology Coordinator Rick Herber. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Jordan. Any questions for Rick? Get you off the hook. Okay, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, next we have the transfer from the education fund to the operations fund. Are the dunce caps ready? It's recommended that the board approve a transfer of $15 million from the education fund to the operations fund. This represents 7.1% of education fund revenue. Beginning in 2019, Indiana school districts deposit state tuition support to the education fund and property taxes to the operation funds. Transfers from the education fund to the operations fund are necessary to properly fund expenditures necessary to the operations of the school district. Half of that $15 million will be transferred by June 30th and the balance by December 31st. And as most people are aware, if you go beyond 15%, we all have to wear a dunce cap and do some sort of reporting system to the state, correct? Correct. We are well below that. So questions will be addressed by Chief Financial Officer Kathy Friend. And also attached is our resolution to outline those, that transfer. So do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Tom. So could you, Kathy, briefly, so what do we have to pay by law, right, out of the operations fund that, with these education funds?
Well,
And I might add that formerly, most of these expenses were paid for from the general fund.
Correct.
So since
Right.
the general fund isn't there
So
anymore.
we're not operating any differently. The funds have changed.
Right, that's
Okay.
right. So, so because it's being paid for out of a different bucket now, some of that money that is now in the education fund needs to move to the operations fund. And so that would be things like generally the staff that work here at Grile, the technology staff, my staff, the utilities for the entire school district, even in the schools. The heat and the electricity gets paid for from the operations fund, not in the education fund. Legal fees, insurance, building insurance. I think you probably get the idea. All
Right,
those
right,
things
right.
were paid for previously out of the general fund. And those expenses that were already paid for out of property taxes, like capital projects, transportation, bus replacement, they're also sitting in the
They're
operations
still
fund,
in
but
the
they
operation.
have a revenue source, basically.
Right.
That came from the property tax collection that went with them in the past. So generally, these dollars are following those expenses that came from the general fund.
And am I correct that school districts can do this anytime during the school year that they
Right.
want? I think you talked about some districts are going to do it monthly or something
Right.
like that, but
Right.
we've done some,
We just felt like
Planning,
it would be easier
and we
to do
know-
it twice a
right.
year. And it's important to do at least one payment by June 30th because that's the end of our fiscal year and there'll be a financial report as of June 30th. And we don't want to have a
Negative fund balance.
Yeah, or just a very low fund balance because that could have implications in our financial reporting. So that's why we decided to do it twice a year. So we could change that at any time, but that's what our plan is. And so this week, we'll transfer the first $7.5 million, and then at the end of the year, we'll transfer the rest.
Kathy, do you and your financial team like the new reporting system? I know it's a big change.
It is a big change. I think it does provide us some flexibility. I think it's just really important that a school district and the school board really keep an eye on the needs of the district that were formerly paid for out of those property tax supported funds so that you don't lose sight of the priorities that are there, because it would be real simple to say, I don't want to transfer those funds from the education fund to the operations fund, and then maybe get behind on your capital needs or not be able to provide as much service to families. So I don't know. I think it is overall. I'll say it's probably a good thing.
So how do you memorialize that? I mean, if people change, either on the administration team or on the board, how do you make sure that people remember where this all came from?
Well, it is, it's the state law now, so, and the way we have to record all of our expenditures is memorialized by the state. So there's really no confusion about which place you pay for expenditures. But the key thing, though, is really having a long-term plan and making sure that we're not allowing our cash balance to dip too low in either one of those funds. And the board does have a policy that says that we will have a cash balance between 8 and 15% of our expenditures in each of those funds. So that sort of drives, you could have one higher than the other if you wanted to. Our goal in the long run is to have both of those funds at about the same percentage of their expenditures.
You know, I'm looking at our district goals here that are up on the wall behind us, and when you talk about the flexibility and really the loss of identification of certain pots that were once there, and one of them was a fund, the racial balance fund. I mean, it could be in 5 years that the faces change and people forget that racial balance was important. So how do we make sure that it continues to be?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we're doing is in our financial system, we are documenting, we're using special codes For each of those old funds that existed within the operations fund, we are coding them. So like if you asked me, what are we spending now on capital projects versus what we used to, we could produce a report and tell you. And
Okay.
same thing with racial balance. We, within the education fund, because most of racial balance is in the education fund, we've identified those with a special code so that we could actually pull those expenditures if we wanted to identify what they look like today.
But I think another part to that, because this is how we think, she gave you the politically correct answer because she's a good person. We still think in the old forms. Because one of the things that I think that can be a drawback is when you have these two buckets, people will fight about what's in each bucket. Losing sight of the fact, Steve, there was a reason for the 5. And what it forced you to do is to budget like everybody does at home, but to not let one of those buckets fall apart. For example, our facility. I mean, some districts don't spend time on facilities, but we know if we don't have good buildings,
Right.
we can't educate.
Right.
So we will always, like Kathy found out a way to track, but Stephen, we're sitting down as a district planning what we think we're going to bring to you to prioritize. You can't lose track of what racial balance has meant to this district. You have to think in those buckets, and then it's up to her to make sure that none of us goes to jail because they're in the right too. But I think that it's dangerous for us to lose track of that and then start fighting over, well, which of those is more important? Because all 5 of those were important. So, but I appreciate you as a board member, and I think it's going to be incumbent on the board, you know, as we're looking at policies and we're talking about it. If you don't write it down, Steve, it goes away. So,
Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor of approving the transfer, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. Our next regular meeting is July 22nd, but tomorrow in here at 4 o'clock, we have work session. Facilities work session, correct? Just talking about planning, facilities planning. So that'll be 4 o'clock here tomorrow. So, board member comments? Steve?
Yes. I got involved in a state committee organized by the Indiana School Boards Association regarding the 2020 census. And I think we're awaiting a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court with respect to the adding of a question regarding citizenship. And irrespective of whether the question stays on the form or not, the State School Board Association is going to put together material for us and every other school district with respect to a complete count. And what we've impressed upon the group is the importance of counting everybody, identifying hard-to-count census tracts in our school district, the fact that we've been able to understand that over a 10-year period, not counting one person, not a student, but one person in our district amounts to $10,000 in lost federal funds over that 10-year period. So it's understood that what we need to do to convince people to make sure they count everyone, they count themselves and everybody in their family, is that we utilize what is being called trusted sources in the community. And it's interesting that so many of those trusted sources are people employed by schools. They're teachers, there's the woman in the lunchroom, and so many other people that parents and students rely on and trust. And so, first of all, I'm very pleased that if we don't see state elected officials taking a lead, that school educators are going to take that lead. And I think that's pretty cool. So stay tuned, because the goal is for the committee organized by the Indiana School Boards Association to provide a toolkit. So by January 1st of 2020, 3 or 4 months in advance of the official count day, which is April 1st, 2020, that we'll be prepared as a community to count every person. And I know that Mayor Henry is going to organize a complete count committee. We already know, based on data, that some of the hardest to count census tracts are just east of our school administration building. They're in the 46803 neighborhoods that, based on census data from 2010, those are going to be the most challenging areas. So anyway, stay tuned. This is a lot of money on the table for us. A lot of money on the table for us.
No comment.
No comment.
No comment.
No comment.
Jordan? Dr. Robinson?
Just a couple. I love it when people say, oh, you're out for the summer. We wrapped up last Friday, about 350 teachers and administrators being involved in the curriculum writing process. And every day I was being texted because teachers and administrators were coming up with different things that they wanted to see continued. So we're going to have Tracy and Jennifer do a report featuring some of the comments that the teachers have, and also talking about how that will continue throughout the year. So I just want to thank those teachers who they went hard for 3 weeks, working extra hours each day to get that work done. The other thing I find fascinating is that people don't realize starting July 8th, we're going to start summer programming for students. And some of our high schools in particular never end with programming. So for those who think we just shut down at the beginning, at the end, after graduation, that doesn't occur. So lots going on still.
And we're probably already serving meals
In the
at
parks,
what?
place else.
17, 18
Yeah.
sites, something like that? So, is that breakfast and lunch or just lunch?
I think it's both. I think it's both. So we can get that
I was
answer
thinking
to
it
you.
was. Well, I have seen the information, but I've forgotten. So. Okay, well, I really don't have anything, so I'll see everybody tomorrow. Do we have anyone interested in adjourning?
So motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody else. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and the microphone is open if anyone wishes to address the board.